Well, let's start with fake utility functions,
Okay.
which is a historical artifact describing why the next post took so long to write.
Basically that, yeah.
I think that it was a fun read. It was probably even way more fun if you're reading these live when they came out, but I think there's a reason it didn't make it into AI to Zombies, just because it's
It's more of a meta commentary.
exactly.
Yeah. I personally really liked it because it started out, with him saying, I want to address this thing where people have found the one great moral principle, and once they've found it, everything will turn out fine. And then he says, it occurred to me that if I wanted to explain this, I need to explain this, and then that turned into multiple posts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually it's quite funny because I had an experience very similar to what he's describing in this post. I have a friend who I showed Three Worlds Collide to, and he just didn't really get the idea. He sort of saw and this friend was at the time still he was leading alt-right. I've actually de-radicalized him, or I mean, I'm not even sure. Maybe monarchism is more radical than alt-right, but I've sort of gotten him away from alt-right.
Hey, congratulations.
Thanks. It was actually how I got into monarchism. I was sort of trying to use that as a gateway drug for LessWrongian perspectives, but then I ended up being convinced as well, which I should have seen coming, but I totally didn't see that coming. I didn't even see it as a possibility, but which seems odd in retrospect. But so it was really just intended. It was very accidental. I just sort of intended to use it as a gateway drug for a friend. Like I would direct him to the anti-reactionary FAQ and state psychotics later. But anyway, so when he read Three Worlds Collide, he was like, well, but the super habits just seem like a superior intelligence, and he would this is the type of person who like Nick Land would have sacrificed everything to Gnon, as Scott Alexander, paraphrasing Scott Alexander, right? He sort of thought, he would have thought that a super intelligent AI being misaligned and taking over the universe would be an improvement over humanity because the super intelligent is a superior species or something. Okay. And that was, a holdover from his alt-right days, right? And I was trying to explain what was wrong with this view, why we should prefer this, what in his view was an objectively inferior species, why we should prefer humanity to a misaligned super intelligence, right? But I actually found it very difficult for the same reasons Eliza Yudkowsky is describing in fake utility functions, because I realized, well, actually to explain this, I have to basically explain why,
it's kind of inferential distance.
About utility functions, about how he's basically reifying, evolutionary fitness or something to being some sort of, ultimate value. And it was very, and I sort of realized I was trying to explain it to him, and I was realizing I just cannot explain this over a conversation. I need to get him to read basically the whole sequence to get it. Yeah. So it was very relatable for me to read this fake utility functions.
Yeah, I loved that the demonstration of how much longer things take once you actually sit down to do them, and the fact that he was not originally had any idea to write an alien god, which is one of my favorite LessWrong posts, and is insanely influential throughout the whole community. And it kind of shows that you don't know exactly what kind of awesome stuff you're going to end up doing unless you sit down and try to do something, even if you think it's much simpler and you don't have awesome goals. You might accidentally do awesome stuff along the way, which is one of the reasons I always encourage people to always try to do stuff.
Yes, absolutely. People should do stuff. And this is actually one of this idea that people should do stuff. It may sound odd to say this, but that's actually very, very integral to my worldview, and it's one of the things I really struggle to convince people that they should. But
do you think that's more of a? So, would you say that's an aristocratic thing, and communitarians don't strike out as much to do stuff on their own?
No, communitarians also should do stuff. The difference is a communitarian should strive for basically being competent and being valuable to the community. What you'll see with But communitarians naturally do this. You don't need to encourage communitarians that much. At least not if they live in a community. If they haven't found a community, that's when they won't do it. But what you'll notice, if a communitarian becomes disabled and unable to do his job, right? He'll try to help out in little ways, to talk to people who need somebody to talk to. He'll try to comfort people, to entertain, old ladies with conversations, to, find little ways to still be a contributing part of the community. And he's just like, and it won't even be necessarily out of a sense of duty or responsibility. It will just be like from his nature. He just cannot stop, wanting to do something for the community.
Right.
And that's really one of the virtues, this kind of altruism, this communitarian altruism that LessWrong is a hate polemic against. It really works quite well in these communitarian communities.
Right.
And
I do.
But
okay.
So communitarians should strive for basic competence, but aristocrats should strive for excellence. Like they should not just try to do stuff, or even just to try to do stuff well. They should try to do it very well. Because that's how they develop these aristocratic virtues.
Okay.
And that's where I have a lot of trouble convincing people that they should, hold themselves to higher standards than they currently do. Or at least aim higher than they do. Not necessarily hold themselves to high standards, but aim higher and like keep at it until they.
So, I mean, yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea necessarily, but I think for most people, just getting started on doing something, even something very simple, can often snowball into much larger, awesomer things. And so doing anything at all, I think, is great. You don't necessarily have to aim high.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Yeah. But also doing anything, like I assume, like what you mean by doing anything isn't just, watching Netflix all day.
Right. Yeah. No. Like,
it's like actually taking on projects.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all in favor of like if they're not currently doing stuff, like just getting them to do stuff is a massive improvement. And that's also something that's is part of part of my worldview, part of like trying to get people to like have even if it's not like grand ambitions, but just to have some sort of ambition, something they're trying to do.
Yes, but we should move forward. I did just want to say I really loved reading the summary of like how he ended up in this point, and it was really, really cool to behold. And I wish that he had done it a lot more sequences, because seeing everything like being pulled in from all the different things he wrote and all stuck into one post, it was like oh shit.
Can kind of see that actually in a lot of posts where a lot of LessWrong posts contain links to other LessWrong posts. It's like kind of I don't know. I was going to say kind of the failure of the format, but like
also a feature.
But also a feature.
It's like the spaghetti crawl just through all the links.
Yeah, that was like I would actually almost like to look at this as a mind map or something, but because we can't, we have web pages to look at, and these are words, so it has to kind of mimic a book. But it's I don't know.
All right, well, that takes us to fake utility functions, which is the actual post that he was working to all this time.
Which has the same, like, first two paragraphs.
Yes, it does. Okay, I guess, all right. It basically starts that a utility function doesn't have to be simple. He notes again that a human brain implements 1,000 shards of desire, and explaining that without a very long introduction, like he has written over these months, is hard, and someone's just going to hear humans are trying to maximize fitness, which is the exact opposite of what evolutionary psychology actually says, which I wanted to briefly just comment on, because I do hear that a lot from people that like evolution, has made us to maximize fitness, which I guess is an incredibly wrong misreading of EvoPsych.
It's an incredibly easy
mistake.
Yeah, it's an incredibly easy wrong answer to come across if you don't understand what you're talking about. Yeah. Which, in fairness, it's not taught well. So,
and people also sometimes make it an ought thing, and they're like, evolution, therefore humans ought to maximize fitness.
Right.
And you see that a lot in like alt-right places, very sort of common era.
Replacing God with evolution, but acting like it's still, you have to obey it, or it's some kind of authority figure.
But yeah, this is the post about the utility function problem. He points out that if you leave out even one of these 1,000 shards of values from a superintelligence, and even if you've successfully included all the other ones, you could end up with a hyper-extensional catastrophe worse than death. For example, if there's a superintelligence that wants everything for us that we want for ourselves, except human values related to controlling your own life and achieving your own goals, that's one of the oldest dystopias in the book. And he names an actual dystopia book from the 50s.
Yes. Yeah, I might just sort of gesture vaguely at democracy and the New Deal regime. as being like very controlling in many ways. But I mean, it could get a lot worse, of course, and it would get a lot worse with such an AI. But,
You sounded like you had a comment, Jace?
Huh? No.
About that thought? No. Okay. So he says, okay, so if you have one amazing simple utility function that these people are saying, is the way to solve friendly AI, like how do they deal with this objection that a simple utility function can't incorporate all these different shards of desires? And then he kind of has a meltdown and says, why would anyone possibly...
It's that they're not used to thinking in terms of utility functions. When most people try to talk about good and evil, what they are referring to really is human benevolence and human malevolence. And these are not necessarily as like difficult phenomena to grasp as explaining the phenomena. It's actually quite plausible that human malevolence could have like a single unified cause without that therefore meaning that we can use our understanding of human malevolence to solve AI alignment.
Yeah.
And I think that's basically what people are trying to think. They're just trying to they sort of misunderstand the problem of AI alignment as how do we keep the AI from being malevolent.
Yeah.
And that's where they come up with one great moral principle, because
don't be evil.
It may be the case. It may be the case that human evil is caused by like one or a couple of things, right? Freud would say Destrudo or some. Well, he would say Thanatos, or no, that was after Freud. He would say like Death Drive, and I think that's a little bit wrong.
I agree. I think that's, Eliezer's whole point is that you can't just have one small, simple thing. And when he saw the people in his community being like, oh, okay, cool, we've got this utility function, that's what we have to solve. He says, why would they're not searching for objections to their theory. They don't know any of the stuff. They aren't thinking about burdens of proof. They don't know the problem is difficult.
Right.
They heard the word super goal and went off in a happy death spiral around complexity or whatever. And reading further into this post, it seems like he kind of coined this term super goal, which was misinterpreted, and also that his community really fixated on the thing that would solve this is a desire for more complexity. Complexity is good, complexity is interesting, and AI that wants more complexity is going to create a world that we like. And like this post to me sounded like it was born of him having a panic over the community latching onto something and falling into what he sees as a failure mode that could wipe out human existence or make it, an extreme dystopia forever. And I think one of the interesting things to me is that, like, I don't think this is a concern, like, anymore. The AI safety field isn't hung up on, how do we make an AI like complexity? This is what's going to answer this. And yet,
right.
his freaking out over this solution being latched onto was a major driving factor in the founding of the AI safety field, which is kind of fascinating. Like, at the time, his community was almost the only people that were even thinking about this, so it was kind of a big deal, and now it's a much larger distributed thing. But, like, looking back at this post, we kind of got to see how a small spark of misunderstanding eventually blew up into a thing that is trying to fix AI alignment and is a massive deal in the world. And I think, like, this might be the only time in my life I'll get to directly witness this happening in real time, which, I mean, obviously not now, 15 years ago I witnessed it, but it was like looking in this with the goggles of looking at history. Like, I didn't know this was what was going to result, that we were going to have the movement we have nowadays and all these genius programmers working on it. It's really amazing to look back on.
Yes. Well, I wasn't in the community when this post was made. I was like 8 or 9 years old when it was when it came out. 9 years old when it came out. So I only read it like 5 years later. I think I read it around age 14. So one thing I would say is, I think it's not even necessarily that people's. I mean, sometimes people are just like wrong in their happy death spiral, but sometimes they've actually found something close to a real principle to explain basically the phenomenon of human malevolence, but they're just sort of answering a different question. They're sort of trying to address the nature of evil, which is a very sort of very limited subset of axiology, right? So I like to say that AI alignment is basically a very pure form of a more general class of problem that I call axiological alignment, which also includes things like, okay, how do you regulate? How should the market be regulated? Right? You have basically the market is a very, very powerful optimization mechanism, but it doesn't quite optimize for like coherent extrapolated volition of humanity, right? And so there's a sort of misalignment between this very powerful optimization thing and our actual values, and I call that an axiological alignment problem. And AI alignment is just a very, very pure version of that, because what you're trying to align is basically a god.
Nice.
So what people are coming up with when they're coming up with one sort of complete explanation of evil, what they're really dealing with there is a much more limited problem within axiology. It's just like there's this one kind of pattern of behavior that we see in human beings, and like, what is this about? Right. And I think that's basically what they're answering. And I think sometimes their answers are basically correct. I think Carlyle was pretty close, right? Thomas Carlyle, whom I've quoted earlier. So his answer is basically that when people are sort of, that evil has a lot to do with sort of willful blindness and willful, refusal to draw distinctions. Right. There's this sort of concept of
I hate to interrupt you, but we're getting a little bit off topic, and we're trying to stay more on topic nowadays.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. But what I'm getting at is I think there's actually a sort of mutual misunderstanding here. I think clearly the people who are giving this one great utility function or something, one great moral principle of which all other values are a mere derivative consequence, I think they're clearly misunderstanding what Witkowski is trying to do with like AI alignment research. But I think he may also be misunderstanding what the answers mean. I think they may sometimes like.
I think they're decent answers if you're a human, but this community was trying to make a superhuman thing, and a decent answer for a human is not going to cut it.
Right.
Yeah, right. It's interesting. I could think of like, a good plausible bad answer might be like love, right? As like the one governing utility to put into something or somebody.
I think you can go very, very wrong with that. Because,
right. That's the thing. Like, you can go like...
Because that's... Well, even with humans, because then you get basically... that's basically the hippie answer. And I'm quite critical of hippiedom. I've seen, I have a close friend who was basically raised in a very, very, very hippie household, like maximum hippie. And it has... he's very repressed now because like it's related to the sort of toxic positivity often.
It can derange you, but Stephen, you were saying?
Oh, I was going to say, I was going to use human examples because I don't have any superhuman ones. But like, some people might be inclined to like wirehead their kids out of love, or to shelter them from every possible danger out of love, and all of them will just make the kid weaker, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's a quick example to show like the plurality of values that you need to have to like be and help raise a successful human.
Yeah.
Jace, did you have things to pull out in this post? I got like another thing I want to pull, but I've been talking a lot. Me and Cornelius have been talking a bunch, and I wanted to make sure the mic gets passed around a bit.
Not really, aside from just getting along with what the post says. So you can go ahead, Ineash.
Oh, okay. Stephen, did you have another thing you wanted to touch on?
No, I think that was the main thought I had on the drive over. So
one of the things that I wanted to touch on that's mentioned in this post is that the people arguing for their great idea would be like, see, this great idea is justified because it'll promote these things we like love. And Eliezer points out, if you're trying to persuade others or yourself of your theory that the one great idea is bananas, then you would sell a lot more bananas by arguing about how bananas lead to better sex. When really you should be claiming that you should only want sex when it leads to bananas, if the great idea is bananas. And he says, unless you're so far gone into the happy death spiral that you really do start saying sex is only good when it leads to bananas, then you're in trouble, but you won't convince anyone else. And
But I think there's still...
I wanted to pull this out real quick because I think this is very interesting in that a lot of people, some people, I don't know if it's a lot or not, have latched on to happiness as their thing and have turned it into
like pleasure,
and that leads
yeah.
to
or
wireheading.
pleasure, yeah. And they've like accepted that as I mean, we just had a wireheading episode not too long ago, and then a special wireheading follow up for patrons, but. Like, there are a bunch of people who really do believe that X is only good when it leads to happiness or pleasure. And, like, they've convinced themselves and others of it. And I'm trying to figure out, like, why there's this happiness hack that makes it, like, really easy to hack humans with thinking that and thinking that, like, oh yeah, we should wire ourselves because happiness and or pleasure is the only thing that matters.
What they're doing is they're basically doing a kind of foundationalism, right? Which is when you try to create a science in the Aristotelian sense by having a central self-evident axiom and then trying to derive everything else from it. I think there's actually a certain value to foundationalism, but I'm also somewhat of a postmodernist, which is odd probably to a lot of people because I'm also a neo-reactionary. But I sort of claim we're all postmodernists now. And if you believe you're not a postmodernist, it's because you don't know what postmodernism is.
I must not know what postmodernism is then.
But, I mean, so of course there's like a strong postmodernism and there's a weak postmodernism. I believe we're all like weak postmodernists.
Okay.
We're not all strong postmodernists. But you know, this foundationalism, I basically have this sort of postmodern take on foundationalism where this is a good exercise for like trying to understand ethics better, like trying to create this very foundationalist system where you have like one axiom and you try to sort of see what happens when you try to derive an entire ethical system from this axiom. I think you can actually learn a lot from that. This is basically how Mises did like his economics. I think you can learn a lot about ethics from studying economics because basically I think ethics and instrumental rationality are going to be like very epistemologically very related.
I do think it's interesting, like, by taking, happiness or pleasure as your foundational thing, exploring that and realizing that it leads to wireheading, but, like, why do people want to have a single one foundational thing so badly?
I think people really like there being a simple, straightforward answer to something. Like,
No, it also makes it seem very rigorous, right? It's this idea that you can derive a complex system from a few basic premises, because then you can basically do
back to complexity.
pure deduction.
Yeah,
It's like they want to do this pure, rigorous logical deduction from like a few basic premises that they can establish with reasonable certainty. In cases where that can be done,
a lot of these people are very intelligent people that I think should know better and do know better in most other cases. There's just this one thing in particular that ensnares them.
Right, but I mean, what it is basically a look for rigor in a very nebulous field, and it's because they are sort of bothered by the nebulosity and they want more rigor. And in fields where you can do this really is sort of the ideal of rigor, to have some premises that you're very, very certain of, and then you derive everything by deduction from those premises. Like, it just doesn't get more secure than that. However, in this case, the field just doesn't work for it.
No, it totally doesn't. I mean, and I think it should be obvious that it doesn't. I have a slightly different hypothesis, which I think you might appreciate considering how you feel about the modern system. I suspect it's just widespread depression that is really fucking people up, and just an overwhelming desire to escape it. And that sort of thing, prioritizing happiness to such a degree, is a way of coping with that.
That's half of my guess too. Like, being happy is awesome.
Yeah,
I wish I could feel like this all the time.
Yeah.
Thing is, I see intelligent people make this in other fields than like ethics too. I see people that's trying to make a music theory, for example, through like one or like a couple of basic premises that just aren't like, and an entire, music aesthetic and music theory and psychoacoustic theory all together from like one or a couple of basic premises. And you can like get some of the way there. You can definitely get some very useful theory out of doing this, but you're just gonna like fall short. And I see intelligent people doing this in general. I think it's just like looking for rigor in.
I think that's what intelligent people do.
Nebulosity bothers.
Yeah.
I mean, we want to pick things apart and understand them.
It's like I think
almost
it's
like
a systemizing versus empathizing thing. Do you know, like, yeah. I think people who are highly systemizing do this a lot.
It might be
People who are
like
highly
just
empathizing do less.
the ultimate generalized nerd snipe.
Yep.
Try to make it down to the simplest possible foundational.
Man, when I was a little kid, I have these notebooks where I would like try to write my like grand theories of everything that were just totally bonkers, but there's something about it that's, I guess, it's just fun.
Yeah.
So what I like about LessWrong is it teaches both of these ways of thinking, because like both the way of thinking where you boil things down, like the very sort of reductionist way of thinking, and also the very intuitive way of thinking. A lot of people who care a lot about rationality, they have, the Daniel Kahneman system 1 and system 2. I forget which one is the slow one.
The slow one is 1, right?
Yeah, so
slow one is 1?
Slow one is
yeah.
2.
Slow one is 2.
I think.
I hate that they just named them 1 and 2 instead of fast and slow. And I know that was intentional, and it was a bad intention.
System 1 is quick, system 2 is slow. Let's say like system 1 is emotional and irrational, and a rational person relies on system 2. But like, but Yudkowsky is like, no, you gotta like improve both. You gotta improve both your like, both your quick heuristics and also your like slow deliberative, because you use both of them for reasoning, of course. So you need to improve both. And I like that a lot about LessWrong, because what you'll usually find is that people learn one or the other skill sets. Like, it's actually very few people who have developed both ways of thinking, both the empathizing way of thinking and the systemizing way of thinking. But the best of LessWrongers care about both.
Yeah, I agree, which is a great thing about LessWrong, and which is why we're reading the sequences. And we will finish this sequence by reading his summary of this post, and basically a large fraction of what he's written up to this point boils down to he's trying to finally explain to people that in the end, the only process that reliably regenerates all the local decisions you would make given your morality is your morality. Which is a heckin' hard thing to program.
Yeah, I think that it's a bit subjective too. I mean, there are people who are pro wireheading, and even they have thought it through, and I just disagree with that, like, down to the core of my being. There's a point where I think that we can't find universal morality for humans, and I wonder how that's going to play into aligning AIs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I care actually a lot less about feelings of happiness, like happy qualia or whatever, than most people do, and including most rationalists. I think I would actually prefer like an explicitly unhappy but interesting, but highly interesting life to a sort of just moderately interesting but happy life.
I think I agree, actually.
I would have to think about that. It depends on how unhappy.
Yeah.
Because there's a level of unhappiness that is hard to bear.
Yes, I think I would still prefer it.
Okay. Well,
this is a bit extreme, I think, but
for next time, we will be reading the posts Evaporative Cooling of Group Beliefs, when none dare urge restraint, and The Robber's Cave Experiment.